Good morning. My name is Purna Kumar Shrestha. You can call me Purna. I am Global Technical Lead. I work for BSO International, organization that works through volunteers. And then we bring volunteers, nationals, international, and community volunteers to work together. And also, I'm an outgoing steering committee member representing civil society organization. And I'm a co-coordinator of Inclusive and Equity Working Group of Teachers Task Force. Because today's session is about inclusion and equity, and we are all educators, I would like to request to practice something today to greet in Kinyarwanda. Okay, I say, and you repeat. And I hope that when you go back to your country, you can greet in Kinyarwanda. Shall we try? Muramutse. Thank you. Murakojichana. Okay, so welcome to the breakout sessions on innovation for equity and inclusion in teacher education. I would like to remind you some of the housekeeping rules. Online panelists are invited to keep their cameras on and microphone off when they are not speaking. That this rules also applies to the participants. So please make sure that you are on mute. Online participants, please always keep your microphone mute. And however, you are invited to put on your video or microphone when you are speaking, when you are invited to contribute to the discussion. And please use chat features if you have any questions. And I have colleagues from the Secretariat who's helping me, and I will pick up the questions. And I have a co-chair, Professor James Omera. He is joining from USA, and I believe it's 2 o'clock in the morning. So thank you, James, helping me to co-facilitate these sessions. English and French interpretations facilities are available. And if you would like to follow these discussions in French, please use the headphone that's available. So I'm a teacher by profession, and today's session will be more interactive, more conversation rather than one way. I will invite our speakers on the panel to contribute, but then I will open the floor so that we can have more conversations here. But let's begin with some warm-up activities. If you have a mobile, bring your mobile out, take a mobile out or your laptop out. So El, Khalid, can you just project? So there will be on the screen, you can see or online. And I would like you to use the code and say, what does inclusion mean to you? So we don't see the screen. Yes, magic is happening. So if you are on mobile, you need to type www.menti and enter code 5694419. If you have a barcode reader, you can scan that barcode on the left, and that will take you directly. Those who are online, you can also use the hyperlink that I have given on the screen. Let's take 3 minutes. And after 3 minutes, and we'll see your contribution on the screen. And I will time. It's 9:35. We'll take 3 minutes. Open your browser on phone or tablets or mobile device and type www.menti.com. Enter 5694419, and you will see a box, and you can type and respond to the question. The question is, what does inclusion mean to you? what I call it, it is a collective wisdom. So you have many years of wisdom, and would like to make sure that we capture your wisdom so the Teachers Task Force can really generate this knowledge from you. I see you are typing, even though I say 3 minutes, because you are working so hard, I will add 3 more minutes. Okay, can we see the result, El? Here we go. Participatory processes, can you just click 1 or 2, just the highlights, as I'll read some of the examples. So inclusion means all, very simple, very powerful. Participatory processes to ensure, okay, now you're highlighting another one. So inclusion means society, including, you're testing. Okay, participatory processes to ensure teachers and their representative organizations have a greater voice in policy-making processes. Okay, so another one, and I'm sure online you can see what we will do. We will download this and make you available, the participants. So I will put this on Twitter, but also I will share this link after this one. So another example, let's read a couple of them. Including every human being. Wow, so powerful. Next, it means that everyone will be given the necessary attention and support to overcome the barriers that he or she may face. It does not mean all are equal, but all get the support to participate and reach their full potential. I really like the word full potential, support. So it's not same intervention, same support, but the support they really need. Thank you very much for joining this one. So that's what I call collective wisdom. So we'll cherish this one and we'll really make sure, and you have a present from Rwanda. Let's move on. So progress towards reaching sustainable development goal 4, ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunity for all, we all know by heart now, cannot be achieved if inclusion in teacher education is not adequately addressed. Data show there is a significant room for improvement to ensure that teachers training is oriented towards equity and inclusion. In fact, according to JAME 2021 report, elements of teacher training, this education profile suggests that only 61% of the 168 countries analyzed provided elements of teacher training in inclusion, 61%. There are even more challenges in countries with fewer resources, as illustrated by the confinement, which shows that just 8% of grade 2 and 6 teachers reported receiving in-service training in inclusive education. Teacher education for inclusion to provide equitable pathways for the underserved, vulnerable, and underrepresented, for example, including migrants, children, persons with disabilities, girls, LGBTI persons, indigenous people, ethnic minorities, and the poor, and there are several long lists you can include. Requires context-sensitive approaches. According to the JAME report, Teacher demand for adequate training in equity and inclusion in high. In response to this, many of professional development initiatives to address diversity comes from teachers themselves. I myself have visited many schools, met many teachers in more than 30 countries around the world. When I visit them, when I talk to them, I have never met any teachers who are not interested in learning. Always they say, I would like to support, but I'm helpless because I don't have skills to support children who speak different languages or children with disabilities. Or I cannot adapt my teaching skills according to the needs of the children. So this breakout session is, we are working group of equity and inclusion and teacher education. We'd like to bring the speakers in our panel. We'll start the session with some perspective from the World Bank colleague who is based in Rwanda. Then we'll invite colleague from Global Education Monitoring Report, and just to talk about what they are finding in their research. Then we'll hear Jean-Claude Sabato, who is a VSO volunteer working to promote inclusion and equity in Rwanda. Then we'll also hear from teachers, Sadia Abbasi from Pakistan and Emmanuel Guma from Uganda. So let's start the conversation from Huma. So I just learned that you have been working in Rwanda for the last 3 years. What is Rwanda doing for teacher education to promote inclusion?
Thank you so much for having me over. For those who don't know me, I'm Huma Kidwai. I work as a senior education specialist at the World Bank, and I have been based in Rwanda for the last 3 years, overseeing the basic education portfolio investments of the bank in the country. In the last 3 years that I have been here, I have witnessed several very high-level policy and legal instruments being approved and funding streams being motivated and mobilized for inclusion and for greater recognition of gaps in equity. There has been significant developments in the field of inclusive teacher education and professional development, especially in the last few years. And I'm happy to not only represent the bank, but also the work that we do with the government of Rwanda for the work that they have been delivering in this field. The fact that partners and donors can even work in this space for planning projects that target equity outcomes is reflective of the fact that there is a conducive environment, an enabling environment to work with. And that's really important to acknowledge and not take for granted, because in many countries we don't have that. Rwanda does provide that platform for many partners to come in. It is important to acknowledge, however, that we do need to do better in terms of coordination, especially in terms of resources, identification of priorities, and sequencing our activities such that we arrive at cost-effective solutions. While I want to focus more on disability inclusion in my inputs today, I do wish to mention that there is a need for more nuanced analysis of gender issues in Rwanda. This country is unique for its socio-political fabric, and it's very different from many of its neighboring countries in terms of issues. And we have many counterintuitive findings on gender in Rwanda. For example, while we do see more girls going through education cycle in the country, we don't see them graduating with the same level of education or the same learning outcomes as boys do. Learning outcomes for girls remain relatively lower than boys, even if they are enrolled in greater numbers or are progressing at a relatively faster pace. Similarly, while we see more female teachers in the workforce, like in any other country, they remain relatively underpaid compared to their male colleagues, and not because they're male or female, because we do have more teachers in pre-primary and primary sector compared to male teachers who are assigned, who tend to be predominantly present at the secondary education sector. And these all constitute a set of vicious cycles, limiting girls to proceed beyond boys in attainment of post-secondary education, and structurally being assigned to lower grades of service. And the country recognizes that, which is the great part of the political environment here. Over the last 2 years, the government has progressively began bringing pre-primary teachers on the payroll, and these are 85% of these teachers are female. So there is an effort being made to support teachers on better and more stable remuneration systems. In our work at the bank, we recognize the challenges across the board, not just education in different sectors. But we do have a very large human development investment portfolio in Rwanda. About 35% of our total investment is going to human development sectors in education, in health, and social protection. And in education, our projects span all the way from pre-primary to primary, secondary, TVET, and higher education. We also have bank executed grants for disability inclusion, book supply chain, and for learning target setting and coordination. And all of these are great opportunities for more equitable outcomes. Through our policy investment operations over the last few years that we have been working with the government, a lot has happened on teacher management systems. Last year, the government approved a presidential order that outlines the career progression pathway for greater performance of teachers. And it lists disability inclusion as one of the 7 mandatory courses that all teachers in Rwanda need to complete in order to progress on the career pathway. The same program is supporting a number of other initiatives on policies, and one is to bring pre-primary teachers on the payroll. Our investment projects following this presidential order started investing in the development of continuous professional development modules on inclusive education, disability inclusive education, together with Rwanda Education Board and University of Rwanda. These CPD modules for primary levels and secondary levels are in the process of being digitized so that they are made available in disability accessible formats to all teachers in the country, whether they are in service or pre-service. And a lot of effort is going towards that, especially because the country is moving towards a blended model of teacher training. These efforts are really important to recognize. Earlier in 2019, the government ratified the Marrakesh Treaty, and that's been a really important movement led by civil society partners. The bank also supported in the advocacy work. And we are currently in the process of supporting the Ministry of Education and Rwanda Education Board to develop a practice-based dissemination model of some of the national policy commitments on inclusive education and the treaties that the country has signed. Because left alone, we need to see these commitments being manifested as practices. We can't just leave them as legal binding instruments. Some of the work with teacher training colleges and model schools are designed for improvements in innovations in teaching practice for disability inclusion. And these model schools are important sites for teacher innovations in practice and research. There are numerous innovations, including disability inclusive design of the national learning assessments, gender sensitive pedagogy trainings of the teachers at scale. However, we are conscious that it takes a lot more to ensure that all these efforts add up and not remain discrete.
Right. I know that in the audience, I know many of the policymakers really listening attentively what gift they can take from Rwanda, and so that the minister, your colleagues say, what have you brought? What is the learning they have brought? So in terms of innovation, you listed a lot of things, and I'm very pleased to hear that now the government and the World Bank is supportive of bringing the pre-primary teachers on the payroll, and that's a great achievement to have an equitable one from the gender perspective. So if I may ask you to pick up one or two like innovations in terms of teacher management that support greater inclusion, as well as in terms of assessments and the scale up, I think that's what they're really looking for. Can you just share us a few, please? Thank you.
Sure. I think that's a great question, especially for the context of Rwanda and what Rwanda can offer to many other countries. I think there has been a tendency in the past to hold teachers accountable for inclusion in classrooms or in spaces, that we have to rely on their agency, on their capacity. But what about inclusion for teachers? And that's where Rwanda, I think there's a lot of opportunity that Rwanda is building and capitalizing on. For example, the country is developing a teacher management information system, with the support of many different partners. Now, it's a system that could be utilized very effectively for more inclusive targeting and planning of teacher deployment and recruitment practices, whether it is by gender or it is by skill levels, but also by their trainings in disability inclusion. While there is an effort to train all teachers on inclusion, we do recognize that we need some targeting for special teachers on very targeted skills. And unless we have a management system that manages teacher deployment and recruitment, it's very difficult to, and this system is really, because oftentimes we lose skills. When a deployment system is not effective, a teacher that has been trained with, let's say, skills in Braille or sign language, that teacher, when redeployed to any other field and is not able to utilize her skills and trainings, a lot of those investments go waste, because not are we only sending this message that these skills are dispensable, we're also motivating a teacher from continuing the practice. So I think a teacher management inclusion and teacher management information system is a very important and a potent practice and a systemic level reform that the country is engaging on right now. And I think that should
Thank you, Huma.
a good lesson.
I will just try to now. Thank you. From Rwanda, now I would like to have a global perspectives. And obviously, in my opening remarks, I mentioned James' report and mentioning about teachers wanting to have a training. So I would like to connect with next speaker, Daniel April from GEM report in UNESCO. So are you there, Daniel?
Yes, I am. Hi, Purna.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
So with a smile, so that's very great to hear you. So my questions to you, Daniel, is what are the key challenges facing teachers with regards to their training to ensure inclusion in their classroom?
Thank you, Purna. First of all, it's a pleasure for me to be with you today in this parallel session. As you mentioned, Purna, in 2015, countries committed to ensuring inclusive education by 2030, as set out in the SDG 4 agenda, which calls for education systems to respond to the needs of all learners, regardless of their identity, background, ability. So really here, inclusive education is when the system adapts to the learner and not the other way around. And we could really see it from the Mentimeter. It is exactly that. All means all, and that's the key message and the key goal in the process that is inclusive education. And of course, teachers are frontline actors for inclusion in education as they interact directly with students. So they really require specific competencies and skills, but they also face key challenges, as you mentioned, and as Huma just mentioned, mainly in their training and professional development, among other things. And regarding these key challenges, the GEM report identifies, let's say, 5 major challenges. So first of all, there is clearly a lack of training. As you mentioned, Purna, you mentioned the stats from the peer report. That says that 61% of countries provide teacher training on inclusion, either general or targeting to a group at disadvantaged. And it is in Northern Africa and Western Asia with 46%, and Sub-Saharan Africa with 47%, where this happens the least. So it is still like a very important need. And it is also well discussed in the OECD TALIS survey, where that says that the percentage of teachers reporting a high need for training on inclusion has seen one of the highest increases between 2013 and 2018. And TALIS says that only 35% of teachers surveyed reported that teaching in multicultural, multilingual environments was included in their training or formal education, and only 62% reported having received a training to teach in mixed ability environments. So it is still lacking. Second challenge, it is not fully mainstreamed yet. Inclusion usually is taught as a specialist subject that focuses on specific groups, mostly on learners with disabilities. That is important, but it has to be broader and mainstreamed, covering all, because inclusion, that's what it is about. As we already mentioned several times, all means all. because focusing on specific groups would lead to categorization, and that can even result in stigmatization, marginalization, although the initial objective is really the total opposite. Third challenge identified, teacher training definitely benefits from a greater focus on values, attitudes, beliefs, but that rarely takes place. And it is super important. Like, for instance, in TALIS, OECD, it's mentioned that many teachers consider they cannot respond to the challenge of diversity, or they have mixed attitudes towards inclusion. And for instance, the GEM report mentions that in Finland, for instance, specialist teachers without qualifications are more unfavorable to inclusion than their peers with qualifications. So it plays an important role, training for attitudes and skills. Fourth, there is a lack of monitoring in the training content and outcomes. For instance, in New Brunswick, Canada, key practice is that the superintendent there monitors the performance of each school based on performance indicators for inclusive education, which also include ongoing professional development for teachers, but also for administrators, educational assistants, and other professionals. And last challenge I would identify here, it is that the roles and responsibilities of all actors in education to support the work of teachers in promoting inclusion really vary a lot. And in some cases, it is often due to overly cumbersome organizational structures, and the information provided can be confusing, and that has impact on teacher. A key example that is mentioned in the GEM report that is definitely illustrating that, it is in Haiti, children from Haiti living in the province of Independencia, which is in Dominican Republic, located in the border. They were not able to enroll, like their families, they were not able to enroll their children in school without the help of a contact with teachers. So in this case, teachers were often the only resource that was available to help these families, and teachers were really considered as a key reason why these children remained in schools. So roles and responsibilities are really key, and that's a process, of course, but it's important moving towards that direction of including all through teacher preparation.
Thank you, Daniel, and presenting very clearly the five, the challenges facing teachers. But can I just, you also mentioned about most of the time, this training focuses on particular groups of, or mainly children with disability when we talk about inclusion. So what would be your, the all teachers education should teach about inclusions? That's our belief. So how can countries consider inclusion as a central principle in teacher training and not as a specialized subject?
Exactly. As mentioned, one of the key challenges that I mentioned, inclusion is still too often a specialized subject on specific groups, which generate categorizations and maybe exclusion at some extent. So the principle of inclusion has to be mainstream to generate maximum benefits, and it's lacking. For instance, a review of teacher education in many countries, including Argentina, Ethiopia, Ghana, Laos, Tanzania, prepared for the GEM report, found that the training was mostly focused on students with disabilities. So, and also it mentioned that mainstream and even special school teachers usually tend to be trained separately. And special school teachers in this case were more likely to be more negative about inclusion as a best way to educate students because they didn't necessarily collaborate. But despite that, different countries are really adopting very inspiring approaches to teacher education that embrace inclusion very broadly. I'll share with you some key examples, innovations, very nice practices. For instance, Ghana was definitely a champion in inclusive education, including because of their strong policies. They aim to ensure that all pre-service teacher training courses all include training on inclusive education to enable teachers to deal with diversity, like very broadly in the classroom, and be equipped with relevant teaching, learning competencies and strategies to meet the needs of all learners. And also teachers are trained in the initial assessment of learning difficulties, so from the beginning, and in contributing to the creation of enabling environment.
Thank you very much. Oh,
okay.
Sorry,
Nice.
I thought that you. Please continue. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes, I have maybe, if I have time, maybe for one or two other inspiring examples.
Let's have only one, so that one then people can remember and they can read the GEM report. So we'd like also read the GEM report. So
amazing. In Namibia, for example, the principle of inclusion is really expected to inform all teacher training programs also. And the educational support units that are there, established in tertiary education institutions, all of them provide continuous professional development courses and also monitoring on inclusive education. And last word, to ensure that it is broad and including as a central principle, it's important to have inclusive education laws. That's still missing. Like it's about, we found like 6 countries, 3% of countries have that type of law that is very broad, but 17% have inclusive education policies, which refers to teacher training on inclusion as a central principle, but it's still missing. But 40% of countries cover teacher training on inclusion in their laws and policies. And in this legal framework, the definition of inclusion is super important to align the teacher training to be sure to be broad and embrace inclusion, like for all.
Thank you very much. Daniel, would you mind sharing the link of the GEMS report or the reference so the colleagues online, participants who are online can also refer, and obviously we can make them available after the sessions. Now, we have the World Bank colleagues and colleagues from GEM report, and also whom I mentioned about a lot of policy reforms. Now, I have a pleasure to introduce Jean-Claude Sabato, who is a special needs education coordinator. And I hate to have these acronyms. It's like, it's a SNECO, SNECO, in Rwanda. So let's start. When I heard your title, it's very difficult. And say, what does your everyday role as a special needs education coordinator look like?
Excuse me. Thank you, Pruna. I'm currently deployed as a VSO national volunteer, working as a special needs education coordinator, SNECO, for Nyarugenge district in Rwanda, as part of Building Learning Foundation project, which is funded through UKAID and implemented by Education Development Trust, British Council, and VSO. Through the project, one SNECO is deployed in each district of Rwanda. Coming to the question, inclusion in teaching practice means effective including all children in a lesson. Equity in teacher practice means fairness in provision through adapted and additional support for children who need the most help to learn, including those with disabilities and learning difficulties. SNECO have a strategic role in building the capacity of teachers to implement inclusive and equitable teaching practice. How are we doing this? Rwanda Education Sector Strategic Plan has an output that states that every school should have at least one teacher competent in inclusive education, and that teacher should provide support to their colleague teachers. Hence, SNECO train and mentor inclusive education for teachers on regular school visit to develop inclusive and equitable teaching practices and on how they can support their colleague teachers at school level. The project is helping teachers and teachers to organize a community of practice for teachers at school level, and this provides regular opportunity for inclusive education for teachers to support their colleagues. In addition, SNECO train and mentor a teacher alongside the focal teacher to work together to build the capacity of teachers. These are some of the best performing head teachers in the country who facilitate monthly professional learning community meetings with the colleague head teachers to share good practices. Finally, SINECO build positive relationship with teachers, developing the confidence and responding to their demands and the challenges.
Thank you, Sabato. And I had a pleasure to see you in action and then how you are supporting and promoting inclusion and equity, supporting teachers on that one also. So obviously, when we talk about a new role, and in fact, you are the first group of this role in the systems, what kind of challenges have you encountered in supporting teachers? And what are some lessons, again, as a present? I don't know what you call in Kenya, Rwanda, the present in language. Would you like to give to the participants online and then delegates in this room?
Okay, thank you. Teachers have adopted their teaching practices in several ways. For example, teachers have increased people's readiness for learning by making them feel included, safe, and valued through positive behavior management, using children's name and praise, and responding to children's idea and answers. They have also improved their capacity to meet a wider range of needs through more effective use of teaching and learning material, and taking initial steps in differentiating teaching and learning for the classes. Furthermore, teachers have increased their knowledge of different disabilities and have started to identify the learning difficulties of children and to assess their individual needs and use strategy to help those children. Information has been collected from parents of newly enrolled children using the Washington Group question, which supplement teachers' observation and relevant information is collected on a people record form to inform support. And this is increasing equity in teaching practices. So to support educational recovery, inclusive education for co-teachers, with the support of SINECO, have also collaborated with the school and the community leaders in getting the children with disability back to school. They have also provided guidance for teachers on implementing the government remedial learning program at school level. So to achieve effective scale up and sustain the change, the following is needed. SINECO need to be fully embedded in the educational system. The position is outlined in the 2019 Special Needs and Inclusive Education Policy, but we are not yet on the government payroll. The selection and the training of inclusive education for co-teachers by SINECOs need to be extended to all schools. The better practice and knowledge in a school currently being supported by SINECO can support the scale up. A multimedia toolkit for inclusive education for co-teachers, which is currently being validated by Rwanda Basic Education Board, can also support scale up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I see Huma nodding head, and that's a good sign. And I'm sure the policymakers from Rwanda who is listening and watching this, should be taking note of that one in terms of like a mainstreaming, and you talk about the scale of others as well. Thank you so much. And I'm mindful of time, and I have lots of questions and interactions. So I would like to now interact with the teachers and ask some questions. Emmanuel Guma, can I just check you are online? If you are online and available, can you just say hellos? He was having a little bit of internet challenges as we talk about equity and inclusion. So this is one of the barrier of connectivity. We wanted to bring teachers to give their voice in this policy forum. So if you are not online or having problems with his, okay. All right, Emmanuel. So my questions to you is, could you please describe your role as a focal teacher for inclusive education in Uganda?
Yes, good morning, everyone. For those who doesn't know me, I'm called Guma Emmanuel, a teacher at Geya Primary School in the district, Western region, Uganda. Geya is the host school. Has been a focal inclusive educational teacher. I have been a teacher for 20 years. 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 I have been a te I do support humanity and inclusion and my school in identifying children with disabilities before and after enrollment in the school. This identification is done using the Washington Group of Questionnaires, which is based on functionality area of children with disabilities, especially on seeing, walking, remembering, concentration, self-care, and so on. I also do mentor teachers and guide them on inclusive practices in the mainstream setting, where my emphasis are put on placement of children with disabilities in the classroom settings. I also mentor the teachers on basics for sign language. I do mentor them on Braille, basics of Braille. I also mentor teachers in the district, both host and refugee settlements, on the teaching and learning methods which are inclusive for all the learners. I also mentor teachers on how to refer these children to different partners who support children with disabilities like humanity and inclusion, and then stakeholders like the district officials on education department, and then at the hospital facilities. As a teacher, I also promote social environment for all. How is this achieved in the schools? This is through assemblies, meetings with the staff and the children, and then also have the school clubs where we pass the information of social environment for all, where our emphasis are majorly on positive attitude towards children with disabilities, respect of dignity of children with disabilities in an inclusive setting. We also address any form of harassment or bullying in the school, especially for children with disabilities and girls. As a focal point teacher, I also advocate for accessibility in the school setting and then even at the community level, because I personally am a sign language interpreter at the district level, which gives for me chance to go and advocate for accessibility both in the school and then in the community, especially in the school with the support of humanity and inclusion, where they were able to construct for us a sample of ramp, how a ramp is constructed in the school. I was able to talk to the school management committee where they construct for us ramps at the access to the classrooms, at the toilets, where children who are on wheelchair are able to access our facilities freely. I also help teachers to modify the learning content where it suits the interest of all the children, especially those with disabilities, so that they can benefit in inclusive learning.
Thank you, Manuel. I will come back to you again. I'm just mindful. I would like to open and have a Q&A, and I have still one more speaker. I will come back to you. Thank you very much, yes. And it's really refreshing to hear that you are using Washington Group of Questions and you yourself using sign language to ensure the inclusion of those people with a disability in those policy dialogues in the community and also the district level. Thank you very much. Now I would like to just go and travel back to my birthplace, origin of, I'm from South Asia. I was born in Nepal. So I have a teacher now on online in Pakistan. So Sajia Jagnihar Abbasi, So she is a teacher in Pakistan. Sajia, are you online? I believe, so you can hear me. My questions to you is, could you describe your practices for psychosocial support for special needs students, particularly in the context of pandemic?
Hi everyone. First of all, I would like to share my own introduction to all of you. As said, Purna, I'm a teacher. I'm from Pakistan, and I affiliated with VSO since last year. Yes, being a teacher, it's my responsibility to support the disabled students and to support them, extra support them. Now we know there are 14 categories of students with disabilities, and first of them, intellectual disability. Two students or one having this intellectual disability in my list of students, they are with on IQ level below 70. They have difficulties comprehension life function. These children may having difficulties in simple tests like washing hands, like come to me, whatever it is. Now a very cute baby boy. He was just 6 years. He was my student with intellectual disability. He was not walk properly. He was not understand properly. He can't express his feelings to his family as well as. But he was like the music. When he listened music, he was move his body. He was smile. So that the point to teach and support him, I was designing some activities which was phonical sounds. Uh, being a ECE teacher, I received some trainings to attend the disabled students. So I will apply that categories, and I glad to happy, and I feel very grateful and happy also to attend my students to provide the different activities to support the pandemic period, to support the education for the pandemic period. First of all, I design a phonic activity. I use the rhyming strategy for that student. Like on video call, WhatsApp, I say A say apple, a. B say ball, ba. So he was smiling, he was moving his body, and he was very happy and try to speak like me and try to move like me. And throughout, I was connect with him as a apply to connect with him with WhatsApp call, video calls, or internet. So to the support and teach the students with disability, with the intellectual, especially intellectual disability they have. So I was try to support and teach them.
Thank you. Thank you. Sajia, that was very moving story, and very inspiring story that you brought a smile on that, child's, and then, he could learn that one. Thank you very much.
Thank
Emmanuel,
you,
I would like to go back to you again. Could you describe your practice, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your inclusion practices? You mentioned about using sign languages, you mentioned about, lots of other tools, but how has this pandemic has impacted, particularly in terms of inclusion of learners with disabilities?
Thank you. COVID-19 has affected my inclusive practices by limiting my interaction with the children with disabilities, especially those who use sign language, where they stay very far, and then interaction with them was difficult. And then on that, as we move for home learnings, at times the schedules that I have with children on home learning may not take place because of the long distance where I may find them at the venue of the home learning, and then which limits the interaction. And then the lockdown or the COVID-19 had made some stakeholders to have negative attitudes towards inclusion, especially even the children themselves. They don't feel that they are part of the community and then the home learning. The few teachers who have knowledge of handling children with disabilities, they even don't make proper use of their time to go and help these children in the various communities. Many children who have severe conditions are not helped in the community because in Uganda still has special schools where these children who have severe conditions, they are referred to. And then where I come from, such kind of schools are not nearby. Due to the lockdown, such kind of children were not helped too. And then on that, as inclusive education needs enough learning and teaching materials, these children who have severe conditions, these resources for teaching them, they were not up to date. That's why they were not helped much during the lockdown. And then I also had the fear of contracting the COVID-19 because the community and then the home settings, they still have that negative attitude towards COVID-19. They feel that COVID doesn't exist. As I moved in the community, I was also fearing the COVID-19 that I could contract. However, COVID-19 also helped me to learn that teaching and learning is a flexible job where learning and teaching can take place anywhere at any time, where at the home settings, in the community settings like the church compounds, in the mosques, that learning can take place at any time, at anywhere. And then COVID-19 also gave me opportunity to have direct sensitization for parents to promote inclusion for children with disabilities, where my emphasis were on to sensitize the parents to give tasks for children based on their interests and then their ability, like washing their clothes, cleaning where they stay, and then helping parents in some light domestic work. I also have opportunity to sensitize the parents on accessibility, where others think that accessibility is majorly in the school setup. It's not like that. Accessibility is everywhere people will stay, whether being at home, whether being at the church, whether being at the mosque, even in the marketplaces, where it gave me a chance to sensitize the parents on accessibility through radio talk shows with the support of humanity and inclusion, and then the use of the local leaders like the imams, the pastors, the LCs, and so on. And then COVID-19 also made me to involve the parents in inclusive learning in the home learning process, where the parents are involved on how to plan, when, where the home learning is to take place. And then
Thank you. Yes, have you,
Thank you.
okay, there was a pause. I thought that you just finished your, please finish,
Oh.
and I'm mindful and I can come back. Just finish your sentence, then I will come back to you later for Q&A, because there are lots of comments and questions. Emmanuel, please.
Thank you. I was on saying that parents were involved in accessibility in the churches, in the mosques, even everywhere in the markets. As such, some were able to change their negative attitude towards children with disabilities to be included wherever they stay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Again, I mean, you have given lots of food for thoughts and the presence to participants who are joining online and also in this room. And you talked about how you played a role to raise awareness, the negative attitudes towards the COVID vaccinations, and also the myth, different informations, and trying to really raise that awareness. And you also talk about, shift from education to learning, and really learning happens anywhere at home, and you adapted that one. I'm sure I really picked that message from you. Now, I see there are lots of comments coming in, and if you are participating online and also in the room, please do, write and take a note of the comments. So I have one final question to the presenter, and then I will open the floor to have more conversation as well. So my last question to Sadia, what would you say has helped you prepare and improve your teaching practice so it addresses the needs of girls, and in particular, those who have been out of school?
Thank you, Puna. Yes, of course, the pandemic situation of COVID-19, that was different to teach the students. There was a lot of difficulties to teach and accommodate our students. But I teach my students the pandemic of COVID-19 through the different activities and through the different strategies, through the different ways. Because we all know COVID-19 are a pandemic situation, schools, academies were closed due to COVID-19. Education was suffered. I feel the pupils need extra help and extra support from their teacher side. I was connect with my pupils at the pandemic time. I designed different activities and dispatch by post to my students, and I connect with telephonic calls, I connect with WhatsApp, I connect with internet, through internet. So I almost that was the ways to use the teachers, and I create some activities for my students, and created different activities and related their subjects. For the subject related dispatch that through post, as I said, through WhatsApp, as I said, through parents and their elders. I cannot connect with internet through WhatsApp, through telephonic calls, create some material like stories, like shapes, like shape cards, like alphabets, boxes. And now I want to share my personal experience. Become a part of VSO. I feel a lot of positive change in my teaching career. I was enhanced and grew my skills. Just because I want to share VSO's activity, VSO's contribution is too good for those girls. They were drop out from school due to COVID-19 or their personal reasons, whatever. VSOs arrange the catch-up classes on their communities, and I think this is the best way to approach the girls, especially they were dropout from schools. I like most that type of activity, and I am the part of that activity of catch-up classes. Yes.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to invite, sorry, were you saying something again? There's a delay. There's a delay. Sajia? Okay, I think it's
Yes,
finished.
Purna. No, it's
Okay,
over.
okay.
It's over.
Okay, then it's very difficult because I can't see you, and then I'm looking at your gesture. Thank you, and there's a delay. Thank you so much, and I'm very glad. As a teacher, I was looking at my timetable, and I think we are on time in terms of one. So I would like to I would like to invite my co-coordinator colleague and co-moderator, online moderator in the USA, and I hope, James, we are able to really concentrate in midnight in USA. And just tell us now, what are our responsibilities? What are we hearing? Because as a co-coordinator of inclusive and equity thematic groups, what did you hear from the presenter, and how can we take it forward as a teachers task force?
Thanks a lot, Purna. First thing I observed and heard was the richness of the audience, and as you spoke about, the collective wisdom. The collective wisdom around what is inclusion. It's around participation. It's around including all. It's around attention to support and reaching everyone, reaching a full potential. I heard from Huma and the World Bank that Rwanda has some very promising practices in terms of female teacher recruitment, inclusive career structures, central professional development, model schools, and also, as in the spirit of innovation, has identified some areas for innovation, including teacher awards and deployment. From Daniel, some of the things that came through when we think about inclusion for all, the idea of how do we address variation in training and preparation? How do we elevate into policy and practice mainstream of inclusion in both in-service and pre-service? And then also look at how we can start to promote more coherence to address variations in roles and responsibilities of those who oversee the learning environments in the classroom. So mainstreaming was something that was very important, and I think it's something that then came through when we heard the teacher voice. The special needs for Sabato, the special need coordinator in Rwanda, dedicated champions, teacher capacity building, building into capacity ideas of differentiated learning and assessments to inform supports. We also heard from Shazi the role of mobile technologies as an innovative tool to mitigate the impact of COVID, and then the passion of Emmanuel to, despite COVID, still persist to have those home visits, getting parents more engaged and bringing them in contact with some standardized and innovative practices such as the assessments, the mentoring, and the advocacy for all. What I'm hoping to hear from the audience, and I'd invite the policymakers to continue to reflect on the policy development handbook that the Teacher Task Force has developed. Today we heard themes around teacher recruitment and policy, teacher education, initial and continuing, teacher deployment, teacher career structures, working conditions, rewards and remuneration, as well as governance and accountability. So I think, again, the attributes of policy are great examples of innovation across all the speakers. The goal now is to start to intentionally build them into policy and then educate, and through professional development into the classrooms and to the teacher education programs across the countries. So that's what I heard. Thank you very much. And that's my challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. So again, I'm applying inclusive and equitable principle. So I will take the questions from those who are participating online. So there are some questions. This question, and for the panelists, please try to be succinct. I know you can take a whole day to explain how enthusiastic you are, but time is ticking. And as a moderator, I have to stick to time as well. And that's the only fear I have. I'm afraid of time, and the time doesn't wait for me and for us. So the first question, this is from Liv Lurie to Daniel April. Teacher in a special education school often have negative attitudes on inclusive education. Could you explain the underlying reason and processes, please? The question to Daniel, please.
Sure. Thank you, Liv, for your question. Teachers tend to have positive attitudes in general towards inclusion, but also doubts about the feasibility of inclusion, they may simply not believe that inclusion is possible in many cases or even desirable. And they may have also deep-rooted views, let's say, about students' potential to learn even. And part of this may be down to the fact that teachers may not be immune to social stereotypes, for instance. And these stereotypes are really detrimental to student learning. We've seen, for instance, in Italy, girls assigned to teachers with implicit gender bias underperformed in maths and chose less demanding schools, for instance. But the good news, as I mentioned, is that teacher training has an impact, teacher education in general. As mentioned in the case of Finland, teacher education needs to really tackle views of some students as unable to learn. It has to be discussed so that these myths are busted. And like good practices, just to close my intervention. For instance, in Palestine, the education sector plan really aims to ensure that teacher training is free of gender stereotypes, promote equality, non-discrimination, human rights. So it really tackles stereotypes. For instance, in Laos, that's pretty much the same. We focus on ethical standards of teachers to eradicate negative attitudes, stereotypes in regard to women, ethnic groups, people with disabilities or disadvantaged groups. So that's what I would say. But in general, the attitudes are quite positive, but there are still some doubts.
Thank you, Daniel, for your contributions. Now I would like to ask questions to Huma. As the World Bank plays, you have the Inclusive Education Network recently launched. I see the community practice going on. Now, the fact that now with the internet, these teachers are increasingly have access to internet. They're increasingly engaged in a peer networks to support each other with regards to the students with special needs. From a policy perspective, how can all this learning, how can all the learning and innovation that goes on these networks be assessed and scale out?
Thank you. That's a really important question. And I think from the policy and systems perspective, there need to be standards and regulations that even inform these networks. The networks are enabling, the networks can really lead to dissemination of and sharing of best practices, but can remain, it may remain not so impactful unless influenced by a system that communicates the standards, the systems, and share resources through these systems. So I think from a systems perspective, governments, agencies, organizations, there should be a guiding process for peer-to-peer learning. In Rwanda, there's been a lot of effort towards development of e-learning platforms that are guided by Rwanda Education Board and the Ministry of Education guidelines. So these systems, these networks need to be surveilled and need to be informed with best practices and resources. Leaving everything to the devices of the teachers is great for agency development, but I think more inputs can be provided towards better guided peer-to-peer learning and networks.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to open the floor to the audience in the hall. Any reflection, questions, comments? I see 2, 3, 4 hands. So let's start from this row, madam. Can I just have a microphone, please? And please introduce who you are and the institution you are associated with. And also indicate who the question is for. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Esperance Wamaria. I work for British Council in Rwanda. My question is just a general question on inclusion. Actually, education as a concept or as a system evolved over time. And to the extent where now we are talking about the integration of technology into teaching and learning practices. Then my question is, at this extent, I would like to ask, how does the inclusion concept have been also evolving to meet modern progress standards and the requirement in the stream of innovation?
Thank you very much. Let's
you.
take a couple of questions, then I will ask presenters to respond that one. And Daniel, I will ask you to respond these questions, so just be prepared, and I will just take the question. So hands, Mohammed, there. Then I'm coming there, so I'm just see the hands here, 1, 2. So I've noticed I'm coming there, okay? So Mohammed, and then gentleman at the back, and Damien. Yes, sir.
Okay. Mohammed Raghib, Reform Advisor from Egypt. I would like to emphasize that inclusion is a multi-dimensional policy, including the demand side and the supply side. For the supply side, that it demands a lot of resources and investments, which needs cost-effective solutions. So in the supply side, that is we see that there is infrastructure stuff, like equipping the schools with physical infrastructure like ramps and toilets and resource rooms. And in the human side, that you are not only trained teacher, but also you are training the school management and social workers and so on. So to do this, to do it wisely, we found out that is, you are not going to provide all the schools with the inclusion infrastructure and train people all, across the board, because some of the schools maybe over 10 years that they don't receive, a student with a certain special need. So the solution was that we provide the district who has like 10 or 15 or 20 affiliated schools with with the resources that is cycle, like movable ramps and resource rooms and this kind of thing. So, and if a certain school needs such equipment, that is it's going to be provided. And it is also at the same desk level, there is this unit which has trained people who can provide trainers to training to teachers, whom that is going to deal with a guy with a special need of certain kind of a special need, and it's going to be specific and effective. And the supply side, that is, sorry, in the demand side, we do a sort of awareness for both the parents of the handicapped child, to convince them to send them the schools, and to convince them that their child has the ability to learn maybe in different ways. And the same, and also
thank you. I'm just
saying,
one. Okay, so please, can you just be finished? So I'm just
one
like
sentence.
to give a chance. Thank you.
One sentence. That also we make awareness for the parents of the school to accept having children with handicaps within the same class with their children, and provided the classrooms with the teacher assistants to help the teacher with the guy who needs help. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. I know we are all passionate educationalists and we have lots to say. So what I would like to remind, please try to be very succinct. I think the gentleman in the red mask and Damien, and I see someone at the back. Then I will go back. That's the final one. And then I will go back to one as well. So the gentleman with the red mask, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Noel Marananayo, an academic staff at IPRC Kigali. DVET schools, I'm talking on behalf of DVET schools because I'm serving in TVET. So TVET schools have many opportunities for persons with disabilities. Practical skills are easier to acquire than theoretical skills. If not mistaken, there are many people with disabilities who do not enroll in a TVET worldwide. What are the international organizations like VSO doing to change the parents' mindset and assist these vulnerable people to enroll and in technical schools and retain them there, because they can enroll, but after a short time, they leave the schools. I say this because we have some examples where they attend classes, but 2 or 3 months, they disappear. The second question I'm asking.
Can I just have one question for one?
Okay.
So that we're talking about equity and inclusion, so I need to be equitable. Thank you. And so if you have other questions, remember we have a networking time. So please, we can meet the speaker as well. Thank you very much for respecting. Right, Damien, and as I said, Damien here first, and then I will come back.
Thank you. I'm Damien Gregory. I'm Inclusive Education Technical Advisor for VSO in Rwanda. My question is this: what are realistic and effective approaches to teacher education and teacher deployment for teaching children with severe disabilities in mainstream settings? So the challenge I see is in this integrated model sees the child with more severe disabilities attending their local school. So how do we see an effective approach for making sure that there's that specialist knowledge in teachers for teaching children with more severe disabilities? So one example would be a profoundly deaf child and a teacher needing fluent sign language. How can that be achieved in any local school across the whole country? Any ideas on this challenge?
Thank you, Damien. So there's a final one. I'm not taking, yes, gentleman at the back, and then I'm going to pick up again the comments and questions from one, and then let panelists respond to your questions. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Alphaba from the Gambia. I'm interested to know, particularly from the experience in Rwanda and maybe other speakers in Pakistan. When it comes to inclusive education, learning disabilities, at what time do you start monitoring or identifying children that are special, that have special needs? How does that really got, how do you collaborate with the communities and maybe other stakeholders when it comes to screening these individual children for their learning disabilities? I will take, we really want to know the examples and the good practices.
Thank you very much. So I will just turn to, there are like 4 or 5 questions. First question, colleagues from British Council, was about the evolving concept of inclusion. Damien, would you like to come in? Daniel?
Hi. About the, yes, tell me.
Please.
Sorry. About the question of the evolving concept of inclusion, right?
That's right.
Yes, actually, we really have to see inclusive education as a process. And in many education systems today, there is no system in place to consider like fully inclusive education as a scenario. And we really have to adapt to the needs of all. So, but in the vision of inclusive education, all children, no matter their learning speeds or needs, would be sitting side by side but as we said, it would require like many dimensions, such as like flexible curriculum, trained teachers, teacher assistants, universal design for learning, et cetera, but we really have to see inclusive education as a process that that evolves also, and not necessarily as an end goal. I think that's really important to see it as a process. And to answer briefly, like there was another question regarding like about the fact if it is realistic or not. Let's just like do it in a progression and focusing on where we can change for the moment. Doesn't have to be costly. For example, adopting a flexible curriculum can be a practice that is not too costly for the moment. So let's see it as a process. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I would like to, now the next question was about the more of the comments that inclusion is more of the multi-dimension from supply side and also the demand side. And thank you very much for that contribution and intervention. And the third question was regarding the special, that's teaching and severe disabilities. And how do we ensure that it's children with a severe disability in mainstream schoolings? Any panelists who'd like to take these questions? Sabato?
Okay, thank you for supporting those children with severe disability in mainstreaming school. Like in VSO or through the project of Building Learning Foundation, the support Sineco and the focal teachers are providing can be described in the following ways. So we do assessment that has two stages. Stage one is involved two things we do. One is completing parent survey form for the children who are being enrolled in primary. And then those parent survey have or include more information about a child, where parents inform the school how their children are. And then when the children being in a class, teacher do their own observation. And then after doing the observation and notice something which is need to be addressed, then they do a people record form for learning to support those children. And after that, in that people record form, they draft some possible strategies that can be used to support that children. If those strategies don't lead to success, then you go to the second stage of school level assessment. In school level assessment is where we take those children with severe disabilities or learning difficulties, and then we invite different expertise professionals to sit together and assess that children. And after the assessment, then the professional team set a smart target of helping those children with severe disability. So that leads to support those children really.
Thank you. And online, there's a lot of conversation going on. I'm coming back to your question here. If you're wondering if I've left your question, I haven't left, but a lot of conversation going on about the digital divide and digital educations. So from Sandrine, thank you very much reminding us the disparity is acute in terms of access to inclusion, and also the debate about when you talk about inclusion, as Daniel mentioned about inclusion in a broader sense, not only children with a disability. Obviously, there are multiple, educational marginalizations. A girl living in rural areas and early marriage, and from the gender dimensions of poverty. So it's a multifaceted. So we need to really recognize that. So when we talk about inclusion, it's not just the, one, we cannot really have a dichotomy of, okay, this is, you are included, you are not included, but we need to really look at that one. Thank you very much that. And then there's also a discussion about when you talk about special needs, and I personally hate that terminology of special needs, because it's not special, that's a right. As a child, child has a right to, have a quality and inclusive and safe learning in mind to that one as well. So, and going back to, these questions from the floor, I think that was directed to VSO. Maybe that's best I can respond to you, or the Damien can respond to you in the tea time. How we can really ensure those youth who come to Tibet program, but then they drop out in the retention. So we're happy to have the conversation one. And then the colleague from the Gambia has a question that when do we start the assessment? So in this case, I will go back to Emmanuel, if you may respond that when do you think is the best time? How do we identify? And you mentioned about Washington group of questions. So can you just elaborate a little bit, like how do you use Washington group of questions to assess the prevalence of disability? And once you identify the prevalence, how do you respond to that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. According to Ugandan law, a child is supposed to enroll in school at the age of 6 years. That is primary level. And then at pre-primary level, a child is supposed to enroll at the age of 3. As such, being a focal point teacher, I start my identification at the age of 6 because I'm at pre-primary. No, not at pre-primary, I'm at primary level. As such, I engage the school management committee, the local leaders like the LCs, in the district, and then other partners, parents also, to identify these children. And then on how to use the Washington group of questions. As I said before, this Washington group of questions helps to identify the functionality of the child, particularly where the child has difficulties in functionality. Especially in the Washington group of questions, there are a set of questions where we ask the level of functionality. One, we can say, does the child hear? If the parent says yes, at what level is it? All the times he hears or she hears. If the parent says no, is it all the times or completely the child doesn't hear? After identifying these children using the Washington group of questions, what we do is we refer these children to the partners. For more
Thank you very much. That's a very good answer, and I'm now very clear how we do that one. We have got 2 more minutes, and then, as I say, in a very teacher and inclusive fashion, I'm sure you have lots of things crystallized. Let's crystallize our thinking. What one word would you bring from these sessions? One word, you listen to all the panelists and others, and may I request my colleague from the secretariat, to just zoom again the Mentimeter. So what one word, you will take away from this session? Can you just project the Mentimeter? And I know, and then while she does, I have an announcement to make. Your plenary session this afternoon will take place in this hall at 11:30. So we have 30 minutes tea break. We have 1 more minute. So you can continue to, if you are on the Mentimeter, same coding. So as we used before, let's see. 1, 2. Voila. So here you go. Or you need to change the presentations. You need to move the slide. Okay, so what I suggest, just project, okay, can you do that? If there is a technical problems, you can still contribute, and I will keep this open, the Mentimeter, the code is the same. So can you just project the code? And whenever you have, when at tea time, 1 word, otherwise, many words, very difficult to bring. So 1 word of inclusion of this session as well. So as I said, it's on the dot 11 o'clock. I would like to declare that this session has ended. As I said, I'm really, really afraid of time and the clock. So we started. Thank you very much. Applaud of applause, all the participants online and all your active participation, and the panelists, fabulous panelists, and particularly we'd like to thank teachers and the volunteers who are unsung heroes. So can you just give a round of applause to the teachers? And fabulous, fabulous audience and the participants in the hall. You have been absolutely, superstar. Thank you very much, everybody.